Hi, thanks again for tuning into Cindy's Workshop here on YouTube. Hope everyone's having a great day. So today we're going to be talking about The Burning by Laura Bates. It's a young adult contemporary novel, but there is a splash of fantasy in it. However, I feel like it's more like magical realism than it is fantasy. And it's about a girl, and she has been forced to move to Scotland because of some explicit pictures of herself that her boyfriend released across the school. It instigated lots of bullying for her, lots of slut shaming, so she was forced to move. And I think in today's climate, it's a really important novel. And it was one that I really connected to personally because, you know, I think at some point in our lives, a lot of young women are going to be slut-shamed for the things that they do or don't do. In my case, in high school, I rejected a boy who was a friend, and we spent a lot of time together, which unfortunately led to a lot of backlash on my part, just because I just wasn't interested in him. And I think as high schoolers, you know, which is where this novel takes place, you're kind of swept up in all the drama and in all the rumors. I look back and I'm like, why? You know, I think it's because our brains are still developing, so we can't really just shut it off, you know. But it did make me realize who my real friends are, and thankfully, you know, I had a really good support system to help me. But I think that's another reason why I strongly connected to this novel, and why I really do think it's an empowering novel, because, I mean, the main character in this book, I'm pretty sure her name is Anna. I know. I say I'll get better at writing down their names, but I wrote this review like a little while ago, before I said that, but I'm pretty sure it's Anna, or Annie. Something around that. I'm getting better, I promise. I'm getting better with my note-taking as far as my reviews go for these videos, because I do want to do better, and I do want to give my viewers really strong content, you know, not just fluff. But anyway, so The Burning is by Laura Bates. It's published by Source Books Fire. I'm a huge fan of Source Books Fire books. I tend to get a lot of ARCs from them because I request a lot of ARCs. So yay on that. Lots of free books. Definitely saves me some money. But she was forced to leave her home in England because of how out of control the bullying at her school went, and then her friends just couldn't handle it anymore, so they kind of turned their back on her, and I thought that was really sad. You know, these friends who've been her friends her entire life suddenly decided her drama's just too much to handle. They can't handle it, so they pretty much remove themselves from her life, you know. So you're following this girl. She feels really alone. She feels really abandoned. She feels shamed. She feels guilty. She feels stupid. I think these are all things we can all relate to as readers when we do something stupid. Was she? Yes. Sending those pictures of herself to her boyfriend was not the smartest move. I completely agree with that. However, and the whole reason I agree with that is because if you're taking pictures of yourself, you know, there is always that risk that they're gonna pop up, especially in today's society. You know, everything somehow always gets online. So it's not like you think it's going to, there's a risk that it's going to get online somehow, or it's going to spread, and that some people are going to see this picture and then it's going to spread even more. So I think, you know, that is a risk. Sorry, I'm adjusting my camera. It's not level. There we go. It's a risk you take when you do that. And I don't think young girls should be kind of doing that. I agree, you know, it's not really appropriate to do that. However, I don't think, you know, I'm 28 years old now. I look back on my life and the mistakes I made. You know, I'm not really in a position to judge this character. And I don't think any of us are. I don't think any of us can look back at our youth with innocence. I think we've all done things we haven't been proud of. We've all made mistakes we haven't been proud of. But it's how we move on or how we grow from it that makes us better people. You know, it allows us to see life differently, which is probably why I empathize with this character, because she made a mistake, yes, you know, and she suffered for it, but the way she suffered is completely unacceptable. I mean, her school doesn't really stand up for her. Her school just doesn't want to deal with the problem. Her school is just like, you know what, you're the center of this problem, we're just going to expel you, and that'll make everything better. Except it doesn't make anything better, because she's still being bullied. You know, her and her mom, they moved to Scotland, for the love of God, a small little town in Scotland, and then she takes her mother's maiden name so that no one can find her, and yet somehow they find her, and the bullying starts all over again, you know. And I think it's really unfortunate, because the school didn't resolve any issues. The school didn't solve the problem. They didn't deal with it. They just didn't want to deal with it. And it really explores this. You know, I think in a lot of situations with schools, you know, they have so many kids that they have to take care of that they don't really know how to deal with issues like this. So it's a really good evaluation on how you should deal with a situation like this. You know, what is the proper way to handle this? She made a mistake, yes, but she is now a victim of her mistake, and she's suffering so much for it. I mean, you're not dealing with the problem, the core problem of how society sees women, you know, it's just kind of like objects. And it's just like, no, here's what you need to do. And her mother does do this. You know, when the bullying starts up and her mother confronts the school, she's like, no, you are not expelling my daughter. You are going to find the people responsible for her bullying, and you are going to teach them that this is not okay, because bullying is never okay. You know, it's never okay, bullying. But the dean, he doesn't want to deal with the problem. Her mother's like, no, you're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with it properly. And she even says, she's like, this is what I should have done at your old school. So it's a really good evaluation of the school systems, and how I think we see this in the media, how schools sometimes just don't want to deal with the problems. I'm hoping I'm going to be like her mother if something like this happens with my son when he's in school. You know, I don't want the school to just kind of sweep problems under the rug. They need to deal with them. You know, it's when you're an educator, if you go into this practice, you go into it knowing that you're going to have to deal with a lot of kids, you're going to have to deal with a lot of issues, you're going to have to deal with a lot of problems. You can't ignore them. When you became a teacher, this is the responsibility you agreed to take on. You know, I do agree that teachers are severely underpaid because they have to look after so many kids. I know it gets so stressful for them. I can only imagine if I had 20 of my son. Oh my God, I love my son, but sometimes it gets a little, okay, all right, calm down, you know? I mean, he's a baby, and what happens when he gets older? I mean, I do plan on having more kids with my husband, so I can only imagine the stress, the frustration that teachers feel, the pressures they feel, not just being a teacher, but from parents as well. But I do agree that if you're going to go into this profession, you agreed to handle situations like this, or at least try to handle situations like this. And in this book, she's showing us that the teachers, the schools, they didn't want to deal with it. They just kind of wanted to sweep everything under the rug. And I definitely think it's great that Bates highlighted that with her story, from going from one school to another. This whole drastic name change, identity change. She needs to find herself again, this character. She feels so lost and so alone and so, abandoned, that she made a mistake. But I don't think our mistakes should haunt us for the rest of our lives. I don't think that, unless that mistake ended up hurting someone. In this case, it didn't hurt anyone but herself. I don't think our mistakes should haunt us forever. And I like that Bates structures the story in such a way to do this, to highlight this, how our school systems and our society is kind of painting women as victims. No one asked for it. I can't stress that enough. No one asked for it. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. The way someone dresses, the way someone acts, doesn't mean they are asking for any sort of mistreatment ever. Can't say that enough. And yeah, she made a mistake, but she didn't ask to be treated the way she was. Her boyfriend pressured her. He blackmailed her. He emotionally abused her, and it is unacceptable that he did that. And I think it's great that Bates highlighted that this is kind of like our society. Rapists get months in prison when they should get years in prison. Abusers, sometimes I feel like they just don't get enough time for all the pain that they've caused people. And this boy in this novel, he wasn't reprimanded at all. He wasn't. He just continues to bully her. And I think it's really unfortunate that that's kind of how society is. We've made so many steps forward toward equality, but we're still so far from equality. And I think it's really sad that that's how it is. And I think what Bates does with her novel is really compelling. She analyzes society and puts it into a high school setting that I think everyone can relate to. Young readers, old readers, looking back on, their youth, we can all relate to this story. We've either known a girl who was shamed, we've either been the girl who was shamed. We were either quiet about it and let the shaming continue, or we stepped up, and helped the girl. Whether you're a guy or a girl, you either stepped aside, you were part of it, or you fought against it. Those are the three things. And if you just stepped aside and remained silent, you're just as guilty as those people who were bullying. Plain and simple. Because your silence speaks volumes. Your inability to act speaks volumes. But anyway, there are lots of good dynamics in the story as well, between her and her friends. And I love the dynamic between her and her mom. Her mother doesn't blame her at all. Her mother is supportive and her mother is loving. And I think we should all strive to be like her, understanding and just like take deep breaths and be like, okay, but why did you do this? Help me understand. I think parents, there's so much that happened from when we were in school to when our kids were in school. I know the world is going to change a lot by the time my son is in high school. You know, at least I hope, and I hope for the better. So I think there's always like this barrier of, you need to help me understand. And her mother is so supportive. Her mother is so by her side. I love that dynamic. I love that unity between mother and daughter. And I think a lot of literature kind of doesn't highlight it as much. You know, this understanding that as parents, our kids are going to do things that are going to disappoint us. Yes, of course. But we should seek to understand our kids so that we can help them be better people. My personal opinion. No one has to agree with me. It's perfectly fine, you know? My kid's just a baby right now, so who knows what's going to happen when he grows up. I say a lot of things now, but things can change, you know? My reaction can change. I hope not, but that's life. Things are always in motion. Things are always changing. But I love how her mother stands by her side throughout everything. I think it's compelling, I think it's empowering, and I think it allows the reader to really connect to the story and feel for this character. And then you have the magical realism aspect. So she's doing a history project, and she finds this girl who was burned at the stake. So she was burned at the stake because the man who took advantage of her, you know, a nobleman took advantage of her. And then when she said, "You're the father," he said, "No, I'm not." And she was put in the stocks, and then when he died at sea, everyone said witchcraft. So I think there's a lot of, it's so sad that we can relate that so much to today's society. And it's not through the research that she discovers that. She finds a pendant of Maggie, you know, the girl who's burned at the stake, and she's having visions. She's reliving her memories in her life and the things that happened to her. She's feeling what she felt, betrayed, alone, abandoned, and ultimately grief-stricken. You know, she burned at the stake. You know, she's an adulterer. She had a child out of wedlock. How dare she? Doesn't matter that she was raped, you know? I think it relates a lot to society and to the story, you know? She's the victim. The girl is the victim, and yet you're criminalizing her. You know, I think Bates is painting such a powerful message for the reader. It's still going on today. We are still turning victims into criminals. Real victims into criminals. And I'm so against that. You know, a victim is a victim. You know, as long as they're not lying. It's the liars I can't stand, because then they make it harder for actual victims to come forward. You know, and I don't like them. But who's to say who's the liar, you know? It's not until you have all the evidence that you know who is a liar and who isn't. But in any case, you know, Bates is telling a powerful story. She's using life, real life, to tell the story of bullying, of slut-shaming, of how society is still painting the victim as the criminal. And I think it's a great story. I really do recommend it to everyone. I give it 4.5 stars, just because some of the pacing, when it came to the sort of fantastical aspect, was a little jarring. You weren't quite sure what was happening. You're like, and you're kind of questioning yourself, is this a contemporary fiction? Is this a fantasy story? You're kind of caught in the middle because you're really not sure what to think about it. So I give it 4.5 stars. 4.5 stars because of that, because it is going to leave readers kind of questioning, is this fantasy? Is this contemporary fiction? Fantasy, fiction, fantasy, fiction. You're unsure of what it is at the end of the day, but that doesn't take away from the powerful message of the story, in my opinion. So, The Burning by Laura Bates. There is a description, there's a link in the description below to purchase the book on bookshop.org. Definitely get the book from bookshop.org because a percentage of all sales do go to local booksellers, you know, local bookstores. And please support the author. Please support libraries. If money is too tight, go to the library. Check this book out. It's definitely worthwhile. It's definitely worthwhile to even sit with a book club and read and analyze the story and sort of take it apart and share it and use it academically. So, you know what, go to the library and check out this book if money is too tight. And please support me by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. As always, happy reading.